What is up? Welcome into Pushing the Pile. I'm Mike Renner. He's Kyle Long. Today we're going to be breaking down the Super Bowl contenders. Not just, your run-of-the-mill teams that could go on a run and make Super Bowl. The teams that actually have a shot here. We're going to be giving you 3 tiers, how we see them stacking up, who could actually be bringing home the Lombardi Trophy this season. Kyle, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. And I want to give people a shout out at home. Thanks for listening, but also keep Mike in your thoughts and prayers. This is the last weekend that we get before the regular season of the NFL. We're going to watch some college football together on Saturday. I'm making my Instacart list right now. We're finding out if he's celiac by day's end. So send your thoughts and prayers in the chats. I'd love to have a couple beers and maybe a Bundberg with my guy here. You know what I'm saying?
It would be great, but yeah, my stomach has been messed up for a while.
Thoughts and prayers.
Unfortunately. Like I said, we're doing that a little bit later. Super Bowl contenders, we're going to have news in a little bit. And as always, this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Now time for the first off the ball segment, because some news. It's kind of the calm before the storm. We had the week of cutdowns, we had the waiver wire pickups, and we have kind of the starters being named here. The biggest one, probably in my opinion, Jacoby Brissett, being named starter there in New England over number 3 overall pick Drake May. Did they make the right call here, Kyle?
Man, I think this is the right decision for Coach Mayo and this organization. They know that they're not going to be on our contenders list here today, so they're going to find a way to try and be on the list maybe next year. And with Drake May as their featured starting quarterback next year. But Jacoby Brissett going to go out there, weather the storm for this football team, a guy who's been a lot of places, seen a lot of things in some bad situations. This is not uncharted territory for Jacoby Brissett, unfortunately, but he's a pro, Mike.
Yeah, I have to get on board with this decision. I've been banging the table for this. Not to say Drake May is not ready. It is the situation you brought him to.
The team ain't ready for Drake May.
The team ain't ready. I'm going to go through here and name their offensive line for you guys. And you can stop me when you recognize one of these names, because it might take a little bit here. Vidarian Lowe, going to be your starter at left tackle. Sidney So, going to be your starter at left guard. David Andrews, your starter at center. Layden Robinson, rookie, 4th rounder, likely your starter at right guard. And then Mike Onwenu, who they gave the big contract to, who's been their best offensive lineman for a while now, likely to start at right tackle. So you got really 1 above average starter. You'd like to have 5 above average starters, ideally, when you're throwing out a rookie quarterback. That's kind of what Caleb Williams has over in Chicago with his situation.
Whoa.
Close to it.
Well, I would say this. The skills don't match up with the lack of skill up front. If you've got a group that doesn't have a star-studded offensive line, you better have a really good separation locker or wide receiver room that can get open quick, provide your rookie quarterback with the opportunity to get the ball out of his hand unscathed. I don't think they have the trust in either unit, offensive line or receiver room in New England. That's why we're seeing Jacoby Brissett go weather the storm, big dog. We got good trainers. We'll take care of you.
They may have to with that offensive line. But, yeah, I think this was the right call. What are your thoughts, though? Because over in Pittsburgh, they named Russell Wilson the starter, not Justin Fields, who they traded for over the course of the offseason. But Russell Wilson now going to be commanding Arthur Smith's offense. Was this the right call?
I think when you're Arthur Smith, you want to know what you're going to get out of your guy. And there's days where Justin Fields runs out of that tunnel in whatever jersey he's wearing, and he's the best player on the field. And then there's other days where you walk out and he makes you scratch your head on some of the things that you see him pass up on in terms of open receivers, in terms of tucking it and running it. Sometimes he can stay put too long. Sometimes he seems to be undergoing paralysis by analysis. I'm sure you've heard that in sport before. But Russell Wilson is a guy that before he got to Pittsburgh, he's had a really successful career. He can read defense. He can get the ball out. I'd like to see him try to find a way to be the real leader here now that he is the quarterback 1 in Pittsburgh. But for Justin Fields, you can hang your hat on the fact that at any given moment you could be thrust into that quarterback spot in Pittsburgh. And I know that fans just want to see an offense that looks modern era in Pittsburgh, and that's why they got Russell out there. Get the ball out, get it out on time.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin has no time to be developing a quarterback, right? That was the last 2 years. They went through that experiment. It obviously has not worked out and turned into playoff wins for them. Now they just want a floor. And to me, Russell Wilson gives you that more consistent week-to-week floor, because this is a team that thinks they're going to win on the backs of their defense, right? They are not. And that's kind of how they built it and why they brought in Arthur Smith and why they brought in this offensive line, because they want to ball control up front. That's what they want to do offensively. That's what Arthur Smith's done over the course of his career as an OC, whether it was with the Titans, whether it was with the Atlanta Falcons. That's the brand of football he has schemed up for. So they're trying to win with the backs of their defense. Russell Wilson gives it that more consistent week to week to win those kind of games, whereas with Justin Fields, he can give you maybe higher highs. When he's really on, when he's really cooking, when he's dynamic out of the pocket, it looks a lot more impressive than Russell Wilson does. But, man, he had some low lows, too, over the course of his Bears career. And obviously picking up a brand-new offense now, I think you trust the guy who's been in the league over a decade.
These vets, you cannot put a price on experience.
Yep.
And I remember when Brian Hoyer was in Chicago and he came into play and he threw for like 400 yards 2 out of the 3 weeks he was in there.
Else because it was against Chicago.
Something astronomical. But it proves to me the point that there is a lot of value and experience, and these guys who are truly comfortable in the pocket and have been around the game for a long time, they just see things. They process things quicker. I'm not saying Justin doesn't process it quick enough to play in the NFL. He obviously does. But in this room, in that competition, Russell Wilson is the guy that'll give you that floor you talk about.
Yeah. All right, on to another quarterback in the news here for a little bit different reasons. Deshaun Watson had his contract renegotiated, basically turned $45 million worth of salary into signing bonus this season, freeing up nearly $36 million of cap space. And so I'm going to try to give the folks at home a full breakdown of what exactly this means, because there's a lot of reports out there, because the cap is kind of this black box that a lot of people don't quite fully grasp at times, and especially with this Deshaun Watson situation, which is unique because, if you'll recall, when he signed it, it was fully guaranteed at signing. So some of his years, the salary we're talking about, it doesn't matter that it was salary, it was always guaranteed. So, doing this, what they've done is basically created this new cap space right now that, with how the salary cap works with the rollover, once you create that cap space this year, if you don't use it, it rolls over to next year and to next year. So there's no...
So they took money out of that salary cap space and put it into signing bonus space to allot for spending now?
So you see the cap hits here. $27.9 million is his new cap hit. It was $63, I believe, million prior to this. And you see those escalating ones in the future, but because of how the cap rollover works, they get escalating cap space in the future. So the $36 million of cap space that they cleared also rolls over to 2025 to give you more cap space in the future. So the fact that those are escalating doesn't actually change it unless they start eating into that now $36 million worth of cap space that they created. So if they go out and trade for a Brandon Ayuk, which they're rumored to be in the mix for, if they go out and, say, trade for a Trent Williams and use up that cap space, then you start eating into future cap hits. But right now, with what they just did, there really is no salary cap implications of it other than they have more money to play with right now. And if they use that money right now, then it starts taking away from the future. But as it stands, really not much of a hit either way. It just is kind of massaging the salary cap rules and how it works. So if
I'm a Browns
much
fan,
ado about nothing, but gives them the flexibility to trade for Brandon.
So if I'm a Browns fan, I'm thinking, hey, I got to get this Ayuk jersey right now and customize it before they go on some astronomical price.
Basically. I mean, do you think they should trade for a Brandon? Do you think this is a move primed?
I'll tell you what, any locker room that inherits Brandon Ayuk is not making a bad decision. Now, when you get down to the finances of it, there's a reason you and guys that are that reside upstairs in the building are paid a lot of money, because this is a lot you're responsible for. From a football standpoint, I don't think there's any bad in adding a Brandon Ayuk. And as a Browns fan right now, I'm probably thinking, hey, we're going to try to make a move at this thing. We're going to make a run here.
I will say, if I'm the Browns, and I'm Andrew Berry, and I have this that I'm looking at, I'm trying to get this contract off the books ASAP. There's no way they can before 2026. Them's the breaks, unfortunately, with when they signed it. He will be hitting your cap all the way through that regardless. Even if you cut him, it's still going to come due, unfortunately. But I'm not trying to spend money now to hurt my cap in the future, because we're just not going to win with Deshaun Watson right now. We're flat out.
So you're saying don't touch it?
We're doing Super Bowl contenders. As much as I think the Browns could still win the North, I don't think they can make it through to the Super Bowl because of that quarterback position, because of what we talked about with Deshaun Watson. So, yeah, if Deshaun really turns things around, that could be the type of all-in move that puts you over the hump and gets you to a Super Bowl this year. It could. But nothing I've seen from him yet makes me feel confident in that. And so if I spend that $30 million on Brandon Ayuk, and that's costing me 2027 cap space where maybe I could get, I don't know, like a Dak Prescott or some quarterback then after Deshaun Watson, I want that cap space then because this roster is too good to basically be taking money from.
It's a car with no spark plug as it currently stands. It's a race car sitting in your driveway that literally won't go because it's missing the most important piece. And for them, that's Deshaun Watson, and they're figuring out the fiscal aspect of this whole thing right now. What we got next?
All right, let's get on some waiver wire pickups here. The last bit of news, kind of the last things happening prior to this NFL season. We saw the cuts earlier this week. And some of those guys, well, they didn't last too long on the open market. They got picked up. And the one team that was doing a lot of shopping, the Carolina Panthers, 6 waiver wire pickups, including 4 cornerbacks, tells you what they thought of their cornerback room. Prior to that, they signed Tariq Castro,
the hockey line shift
from the Commanders, Shamar Bartholomew from the Jets, Keenan Isaac from the Bucs, and Lonnie Johnson from the Texans, along with Jarrett Kingston from the 49ers, John Radigan from the Seahawks, and Jamie Sheriff from the Seahawks. So 7 guys in total.
They got to do an icebreaker. Hi, my name is Johnny. I came from San Francisco.
Yeah, but the thing that the waiver wire does, and when you see all these, it really gives you a relative strength of how people think about their team. When you're claiming 6 guys, it means you don't feel good about the back end of their team. While on the flip side, when you see the Packers having 3 guys that they cut get signed by other teams, the most of any team in the NFL, Texans having multiple guys get signed, Seahawks having multiple guys get signed, that kind of makes you feel good as a fan of those teams. Yes. Being like, oh, the ones that we don't even want on our 53 are ones that are coveted elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It tells you about the program they came for, the culture, not only that, but the schemes they came for. There's a lot of questions asked of these guys who show up off the street, as it were, by their new coaches. I mean, how did you guys look at this? What did you respond? How did you respond when you saw this look? I mean, I saw it with offensive linemen all the time, particularly veterans that found their way into our room in Chicago. We would ask them a lot about terminology and scheme, and you would be able to glean some information from these guys, particularly about some of the rivals you play.
The one I'm looking forward to the most, though, Green Bay Packers signed Braden Narvison from the Titans, kicker, to be their starting kicker.
Needed it.
They may be in trouble. They may, when your starting kicker is the guy you're picking up off the waiver wire. Well, Packers, we saw it last year, come back to bite them. Hopefully we don't see it
More
again.
position players should kick. Increase your value, boys.
All right, enough kicker talk. We're going to get to some top-end wide receiver talk right after this. Cal, we got trouble brewing in Cincinnati. Jamar Chase.
Oof.
Just at one day
13
after
minutes
Zach Taylor says he's going to be practicing this week. Jamar Chase. Oh, well, he's not practicing. He's on the sideline. You see him right there. Hat, shades, right down there on the riverfront.
That's a good way to do practice, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to beat, but is it a good way to do practice when you are just over a week out from the first game of the season, hasn't practiced obviously all week, and he's 2 years until he's a free agent, but he really, really wants that new deal.
I'll tell you what, the guys messing with him in stretch lines seem to feel pretty good about him being there. I know that when you're a player and you feel as if you deserve money and respect, you will do whatever it takes to get it. And for Jamar Chase, he's taking this thing down to the wire. Zach Taylor, obviously, he's going to bite his tongue a little bit moving forward after saying he was going to be available week 1. And then Jamar said, not so fast, my friend. And he came about 13 minutes late to practice. And that's a hefty fine there, too. But Jamar said, if all goes as planned, I will be recouped on my fine and I will be made whole. And at the tune of what? What is the number he's looking for?
He was looking for $40 million a year are the reports. Now, that's obviously asking price, the highest paid wide receivers in the NFL right now. You have Justin Jefferson at $35 million a year. CeeDee Lamb just went for $34 million a year. I think there's a world in where you can justify paying him the most of the NFL. Like I think like 36, 37, very reasonable. 40, maybe a little bit too big of an ask, but this guy was a top 5 wide receiver. He is super young still, and at only 24 years old, will be 24 the entire season, and you can kind of buy out the first 2 years here where he's starting to get expensive, right? Year 5 of that rookie deal will be in the $20+ million range already, so it's not crazy to think that, from the Bengals perspective, just get it done.
Like, get your guy taken care of.
Done.
I don't see this Bengals team having success without Jamar Chase having an all-pro season, okay?
Yep.
Him and Joe Burrow, they have synergy, okay? That's hard to find in the National Football League. These are a bunch of randoms that have been brought together to play one of the toughest team games on planet Earth. And you got to take care of your guys. If they've got a good thing going, you got to keep it going. We know Joe Burrow's going to be in Cincinnati. Let's find a way to make Jamar Chase a Cincinnati Bengal for life, okay? At least set him up into his third deal. I think that you got to pay this guy, and you got to get this distraction, this dark cloud that's floating over your building, out of the atmosphere as quick as possible so it's sunshine and rainbows when it's Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow.
The one sort of interesting storyline here that I think is worth just touching on for the people at home is Mike Brown, owner of the Cincinnati Bengals, did not come to this franchise the way the billionaires of lately we've been seeing come to the franchise in terms of having money to begin with. His money is wrapped up entirely in the Cincinnati Bengals franchise. And with how the CBA demands that contracts work are when you have guaranteed money, and they already obviously gave Joe Burrow a ton of guaranteed money, you have to put that money away in an escrow account as an NFL owner. This is a rule that was first started way back, I believe, like 60s, 70s, when a lot of teams were going broke and needing to basically, this was a way to protect the players in those early CBAs to say that, hey, they had to get that money. And so kind of a leftover of that. But now with $200 million deals getting guaranteed at the time, some of these owners don't necessarily have the cash flow to do so. And so he's going to have to, so Mike Brown's thinking, no, it's not just $40 million. I'm going to have to go take out loans to put that money in escrow to get to those numbers that Jamar Chase might want. So it's kind of a compounding effect that Bengals fans will let them hear because they've decried him for years and years and years now as being one of the cheaper owners in the NFL. They finally started paying guys of late, and it's obviously led to wins of late. But it's something to watch here with this deal, and the Bengals may just call Jamar Chase's bluff here, and it may be something that very well lasts in the regular season.
Gosh, what a gut check going into Week 1. If I'm a Bengals fan, I would just be livid. But at the same time, I can understand where this owner's coming from, right? Mike Brown is a guy who is frugal, pragmatic, and he wants to take care of his franchise because that's what he has. He knows that potentially another Jamar Chase could come down the road one day and fall into his lap in Cincinnati. But I'm a player. I say pay the guys. They've gotten you to the Super Bowl, these two, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. And when they're hot, there's nobody that can stop you. So you have to do whatever it takes, even if you have to take a little bit of a loan. You got to call Switzerland, maybe sell a couple of those Rolexes. Let's get this guy, Jamar Chase, on the roster.
Speaking of owners who have been called frugal of late, Jerry Jones goes out and gets Dalvin Cook, giving the Cowboys the best running back room of 2018 with Zeke Elliott and Dalvin Cook in the backfield. Pro Bowlers, multi-time Pro Bowlers, but man, they are past their prime in ways that is difficult to overstate. I don't know, what do we think of this Cowboys running back room? Does this move the needle for you whatsoever?
Well, what's better than one old guy? It's two old guys. Put them together. These guys have pelts on the wall. Zeke Elliott, Dalvin Cook, really talented players. When you get them the football, good things tend to happen. I like the youth that they have in their offensive line room. We obviously know Zach Martin is still going to be there, a stalwart on that offensive line. I just, you got to find a way to not throw it to CeeDee Lamb every play. And what's that? You're going to keep the defense honest by giving it to Zeke Elliott, give it to Dalvin Cook. Mix that thing around. I think you got to protect the football in Dallas.
Crazy to think about. Neither Dalvin nor Zeke are 30 years old yet. Running back.
Dog years, bro. Dog years is real. You know that they're old when they start posting the off-season workouts throwing med balls. I saw Dalvin Cook throwing the med ball. First comment I saw, he's old when it's a med ball workout. They're not on grass, and it's so true. I got a job late in my career from like a med ball video on Instagram, so shout out to med balls.
All right, we may get to the Cowboys here in a little bit because after this break, we are going through the Super Bowl contenders, tearing them up, previewing who could hoist the Lombardi after this. Who's going to hoist the Lombardi? Well, we're going to break down all the teams that could. No one knows who will, but I think between us two, we're going to cover who can. this upcoming season. We're going to put it in a tier. So we're going to start off with our tier 1 candidates, the teams that it should be one of these teams. They are the best teams in the NFL. There's really no reason why, other than, the other teams in this tier, that they shouldn't be hoisting the Lombardi at season's end. They have elite talent everywhere up and down this roster. We're going to get to the tier 2 next segment, where we're kind of going teams with maybe a little flaw here and there that could be their Achilles heel. But if they can kind of make up for that, if they can kind of hide that, they could be Super Bowl winners as well. And then we have the dark horses on the last segment of the day, where we're going through and saying, if the stars align, if
we're pissing some people off calling their teams dark horses.
If Eli Manning hits Mario Manningham in the corner on a 4th down, sure. If we get a helmet catch, sure. If we get Raheem Moore falling down on a deep ball, sure. But probably not going to be your Super Bowl winner. So let's start off. Tier 1. Okay. Who's in your tier 1, the favorites to be Super Bowl champs this year?
I got 3 teams in my tier 1. And it goes back to a lot of what we watched last year and late in the playoffs. I've got the Kansas City Chiefs in tier 1. Obviously, I just had to get off the dock there. And then I've got the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers. And here's why.
A clean, tight tier 1 there.
These guys are you look at all these groups, what do they have in common? They have a group of physical offensive linemen that will play a smash mouth brand of football. Now, the 3 teams are different in what ways? The Chiefs, they can do everything. They've got a wizard at quarterback. The Lions, they have a PhD at quarterback, and they've got a head coach who refuses to punt, kick, or do anything that would show any cowardice. And then the 3rd team is San Francisco 49ers. A literal all-star team quarterbacked by Mr. Irrelevant, who has brought his team to the Super Bowl and came back from 17 points down against that very Detroit Lions team. These 3 teams, in my opinion, are the cream of the crop in the National Football League. And if we get to see them at the end, it's going to be a real treat for our eyes. But look, offensive line is the flavor of the week here with this tier 1 group. Kansas City, Detroit, San Francisco. Who you got?
I have a distinctly different view on tier 1, and I have it bigger, and I have one of the teams that you put in tier 1 actually in my tier 2. Mine looks like this. Obviously the Chiefs, but I also have obviously Chiefs, Lions. I also have the Eagles, Packers, Texans, and no 49ers. We'll get to the 49ers and the reasoning a little bit later, but agree with everything about the Lions and Chiefs. To me, those teams loaded, top to bottom, no issues up and down that roster when you look at it. Just not a lot to complain about. I'm surprised you didn't put the Eagles in this tier. Now I know they need their defense to bounce back.
They're coming.
But Vic Fangio, I trust him as DC to have this team bounce back. And this offense looks like an all-star team. I mean, the dream team way back when Vince Young was talking about this, we're putting together a dream team. This is even better, truly, with what they have offensively, that wide receiving core. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Jahan Dotson, 3 guys that can just, you can't play man coverage. You can't play man coverage against this team because one of those guys is going to have a drastic mismatch. Saquon Barkley behind a top 3 offensive line after having probably his entire career a below-average offensive line. That can't be understated, how off he could go this season behind that offensive line, even though they lost Jason Kelce. And then I think this D-line, how they reloaded with Jalen Carter going into year 2. I think he makes the step to superstardom, to that kind of tier 1 of where guys like Chris Jones live at the defensive tackle position. I think he gets to that this second season. That's what I saw from him in flashes as a rookie. And so all that put together, I think that's a difficult team to get out. Green Bay Packers. Maybe it's a homer pick, but the talent was there last year. They were on the doorstep. This team had the 49ers on the ropes in the divisional round. Obviously, that defense was the reason they ended up faltering down the stretch, their run defense specifically. But this defensive line, 4 first-rounders across the front there. This now much improved secondary with the safety position completely revamped. Xavier McKinney they brought over in free agency from the Giants. Javon Bullard, their second-rounder, who looked fantastic this preseason. I think the stars are kind of aligning here, and we'll see a great litmus test for them week 1 against the Eagles next Friday night in Brazil, to be in that tier 1, to be deserving of saying anyone in the NFL right now, they can go toe-to-toe with on any given Sunday.
I know one word in Portuguese. Is obrigado Portuguese? I think it might be hello or thank you.
I know 0 words Portuguese.
But what I'm about to tell you is this. I like your list.
Thank you.
Okay, you look great today. Green looks good on you. But I got to stop hearing about the Green Bay Packers for just a second. And I'm going to talk about them in Tier 2. But I have some questions for you. The reason, can we move to Tier 2? Can I do my Tier 2 now and argue your Tier 1? Can we do that?
Just give a brief. Just talk about why the tier they belong in Tier 2.
So Green Bay, in my opinion, belongs in Tier 2 because the entirety of that offense showed that they can play at a high level in the National Football League last year. This year, are you going to show me that you can play together at a higher level? Is Jordan Love, the person that we're expecting to have this fabulous year, going to meet those expectations? Is he going to exceed those expectations? In the receiver room, you've obviously got a lot of youth. You've got a group that knows how to play with one another. I want to see them take the next step. Complacency is a big issue in the National Football League. And when you have success, when you have relative success, you can kind of coast, get off the gas pedal a little bit. I need to see this group, Romeo Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks, all these guys, pedal to the metal if the Green Bay Packers want to make a run at this thing. The reason I have them in my second tier alongside the Cincinnati Bengals and the Houston Texans. I know we've got a graphic up here that'll be up any second. Shout out to our guy Harry, okay, in the background here, that pushing the pile. The Green Bay Packers lead off my second tier of Super Bowl contenders because I do like Jordan Love. I love Matt LaFleur. I know how hard it is to win games in division against the Green Bay Packers, particularly going on the road to Lambeau. I think they get a boat full of wins at home this year, and they take that show on the road and potentially have the opportunity to beat the Niners once they get there this year. And look, the Niners, they faced some teams that blew leads, and then they blew a vibe lead against the Kansas City Chiefs, really. They were kicking their ass early in the Super Bowl. Second team, Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, they got bigger and badder on the offensive line. Yes, Joe Burrow's coming back. Maybe Jamar Chase will be there, and we talked about that earlier on the show. To me, at the end of the day, it's the health of Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow can stay upright, if this offensive line that they've paid a lot of money to, and they've got offensive lines are all different. The offensive line in Cincinnati, they prioritized size. You know what I'm saying? Particularly on the edges of this offensive line. Sometimes the illusion of physicality will invite the defense to play a certain type of way. I think that opens up a lot of things for Joe Burrow. They want Joe Burrow to prove that he's healthy early on, right? I've seen some of these joint practices.
So you put Cincy in this tier, but no one else in the
tier 2.
AFC North yet in this tier. So you see Cincy kind of.
Yep, I've got a tier 3 that's got some guys in it. I think you're going to enjoy it. And my third team is the Houston Texans.
All right, let's talk Houston Texans because I had them in tier 1.
Yep.
So I think this team, the only reason to not call them a tier 1 team, and I think the only reason to not call the Packers a tier 1 team that you have there is youth. Packers are the youngest team in the NFL. Texans, obviously, one of the youngest teams in the NFL, and super young at like the positions that matter, whether it's quarterback, whether it's some of those wide receivers, whether it's pass rusher with Will Anderson, whether it's cornerback with Derek Stingley Jr. being only a third-year guy. So it's young at prime positions, but it's not bereft of talent. Like those guys, you're only thinking can get better, right?
Yep.
They should only, at those ages, be better this season. And yeah, maybe they're not ready for the high expectations that come with what they did last year and what people are projecting them to this year. But I think the only reason to keep those two teams out is youth that I see as a positive. Because it means there's a lot of avenues.
That's why they're a tier 2 Super Bowl contender on my list, Mike. I think that they're all positives if you're on this list. But you're right.
Fair.
The youth does make me kind of skip a beat for a second. That first group, that Kansas City, Detroit, San Francisco, there's some youth sprinkled in there, but those are vets.
Those are proven.
Green Bay and Houston, those are young teams. Cincinnati, that's a vet getting back on his horse, okay? But for Houston, I think the moves that were made that really instill a lot of confidence in me, when you're making moves in free agency in the draft, you have to try to beat with your roster the best team in the National Football League. That's Kansas City Chiefs. How are you going to get after the Kansas City Chiefs? You rush the passer. You get guys in Patrick Mahomes' face. You get him off his spot. And even though he shines in those situations, you do your best. I mean, you look at Baltimore across the country. They went and got Derrick Henry. I think it's to keep the football out of Patrick Mahomes' hands, too. So it's not a defensive move that stops Patrick, but it's that clock management, play control, and that'll be a segue into my third tier here, okay? I'll go first, then you go your third tiers.
I'll get to my tier 2 here
okay.
in just a sec. My tier 2, just to hit on it real quick. 49ers, Jets, Bengals. I didn't talk about 49ers in tier 1. Let me get to them here, and then we'll go to a quick break and talk about the rest of my tier 2. But specifically the 49ers, why I see them as a tier 2 team is there are holes now on this roster that I worry about. specifically still the offensive line, where you're almost solely reliant on a 36-year-old tackle who's holding out right now. You're very much reliant on a guy who wants to be traded named Brandon Ayuk, who very well could be traded before the season. And if that's the case, that was the guy that kind of made this all go. Him and Deebo Samuel are drastically different types of wide receivers. Brandon Ayuk is the guy that you cannot guard one-on-one. Deebo Samuel is not a pure separator. He's a physical, underneath weapon that if you get the ball in his hands, big things can happen.
Yep.
But no one's going to worry about him beating you on a post.
Oh, no.
On a slant and go. Those sort of things, those routes, he just is not the guy that you worry about. Ayuk is. And they utilize him in that role as that downfield separator to open up everything for everyone else. So if he's out the door, I worry about Purdy being able to sustain the success. And now they obviously knew this could be a chance, and that's why they drafted Ricky Pearsall, a very similar type of wide receiver as a pure type of separator. But he's a rookie, and he is not Brandon.
And his health is in question.
And that too. So all those things lead me to say the 49ers just have more question marks, and especially then when Christian McCaffrey, your lifeblood of that offense, is already starting the season injured with that calf. At his age, with how many miles are on his tires at this point, I'm putting him in tier 2.
If there's anybody I trust, it's Kyle Shanahan, particularly with question marks on the offensive side of the football. Look, I love the 15-yard, deep in from Ayuk where he's got nobody within a fart around him, and it looks great. And they're going to miss him drastically. But I still am going to keep them without Brandon Ayuk in my top 2 tiers. Let's just say that.
All right, we'll get to the rest of my tier 2 here right after this break. We're doing Super Bowl tiers here on the Pushing the Pile show. To recap a little bit, my tier 1 of Super Bowl contenders was the Eagles, Packers, Lions, Chiefs, Texans. Kyle's tier 1, Chiefs, Lions, 49ers. His tier 2, Packers, Bengals, Texans. My tier 2, 49ers, Jets, Bengals. I want to touch on the Jets just a little bit here because to me they're the most interesting team in the NFL heading into this season. I mean, shoot, they were the most interesting team in the NFL heading into last season.
Yeah.
Until about 4 snaps into the game when Aaron Rodgers' Achilles blew out. But I do think you just look at this team and what they did in the offseason, rebuilding this offensive line, and what they have from a scheduling perspective being fairly easy because they were, the second to last place team in the AFC East last year. And then this defense, top 3 defense each of the last 2 seasons, the most consistent. And they did it week in and week out, knowing that they had to win games in the back of the defense, knowing that they were not going to get any help from their offense. That's going to change completely overnight with what they added in Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, and Aaron Rodgers coming back. If Rodgers is even just close to the guy we saw as last year with the Green Bay Packers, which wasn't, close to Aaron Rodgers' peak whatsoever, if he is that guy, this is a team that can compete with anyone. It's the best defense in the AFC. They can compete with anyone in the AFC if he's that.
Yeah, the superstar effect. Obviously, from a performance standpoint, Aaron Rodgers can play the position like not many people on earth have ever been able to play it. But if I'm in that building and I'm an offensive lineman, I'm a receiver, a tight end, if I'm a defensive lineman, a linebacker, a safety, I am going to take my game to another level because I know that if I just work that much harder, I could be making the play that sets up Aaron Rodgers on the offensive side of the ball to make the play that thrusts us into the playoffs. This team last year, the people that were healthy and playing, it was like a dress rehearsal for this year. They said, I'm going to play so hard on defense. I'm going to block my butt off on offense, regardless of the skies falling around me, because I know Aaron will be back next year. This is the time. The show goes live week 1 next week. 6 primetime games for the Jets, and I think this is a team that probably plays really well in primetime with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback.
All right, let's get to your tier 3, because that's where you have the Jets. But you got a bigger tier 3 here.
So I have a big, huge tier 3. Some say the biggest tier 3. New York Jets are the 10th team on my list, okay? And I only put them in there because there is that big question mark about Aaron Rodgers, his health, the offensive line ability to stay fresh and stay, with the same group that they came out with in week 1. That's the question. People have asked me, how do you think the Jets are going to do? And I say, if the same offensive line is out there at the end of the regular season that was in week 1, Aaron Rodgers will be just fine, and people are going to hate hate him as much as ever. Okay, the other team, the Baltimore Ravens, 9. Okay, you know what? You've had a lot of opportunity here the last few years to get into this playoffs and bust this thing open, Lamar. I'm putting you down on my list a little bit. You got to prove it to me, okay? You got to earn it. I'm putting you in the doghouse a little bit, but that's probably a place that you're comfortable with because you're a dog. You're a dog. I love the way you play the game of football. But the Ravens, okay, they need to find a way to transform into something other than a dog when it comes time for crunch time. Moving up to the Philadelphia Eagles. Not a lot to be said other than the fact that Jason Kelce's gone. Vic Fangio's in on defense. Some stars coming into the receiver room, the offense. I like Jalen Hurts. I think he's a really good quarterback. Do I think he's at times the best quarterback? No. Some people think that he's, MVP caliber. I don't think he's in that top 3-4 discussion. But for the Philadelphia Eagles, here's the great news. You still got Lane Johnson. You still got Jordan Mailata. You still got Landon Dickerson. You got a guy named Cam at the center position who is pretty good. He was handpicked by your guy, Jason Kelce. Look, the strength of a team is the strength of your largest group. That's the offensive line in stature and in numbers. And for Philadelphia, the people that are the tip of the spear are the offensive line. So I think if that continues to be the strength of their team, there's no reason why they shouldn't be considered Super Bowl contenders. And at the top of my tier 3 list, I've got the Dallas football Cowboys, okay? And they paid that guy, CeeDee Lamb, a lot of money, and rightfully so, okay? He's damn good at football. Dak Prescott, also really good at football when he's on the field. I like the 2 draft picks they had on the offensive line, Cooper Beebe, Tyler Guyton. I don't think they're going to be, one-for-one trade-offs for the guys that they've lost over the course of the last few years, particularly Tyron Smith, but they're going to get the job done, and I do think they're going to run the ball a little bit more in Dallas this season.
I cannot get past the fact that they lost Tyron Smith. Let him walk out the door for a 1-year, $12.5 million deal to the New York Jets when he was top 5 pass protecting left tackle in the NFL still. It's not a lot of money to pay when you are in a Super Bowl window. Now, I didn't put him in my Super Bowl tiers because of that. Because if they had Tyron Smith, I think they could be. I would put them in tier 3. But I don't trust a rookie left tackle and a rookie center. And now, I know you've said before that when 2 rookies come in, it helps them get up to speed faster because they have to learn from each other and whatnot. But if there's 2 positions along the offensive line that I don't want rookies at, it's left tackle and center.
Yeah.
It's just flat out, I think that's going to lead to miscommunication issues and then just blindside protection issues. You're a rookie. And it's not like this guy, Tyler Guyton, was a top 5 slam dunk, what we were talking about with Joe Walt, Olu Fashanu with the Jets, in terms of prospect as a pass protector. There were serious concerns. And he played great preseason, but he is raw. And because of that, I don't know how you get through the gauntlet that is the NFC and go against pass rushers that they're going to see in Philly, pass rushers that they're going to see in San Francisco, pass rushers that they're going to see in Detroit. Now, Green Bay, like there's no easy button once you get to the playoffs. There's no, Tyler Guyton, you can have a bad game. That's not going to fly. So I struggle to put the Cowboys in tier 3. Quite frankly, I didn't have the Cowboys in tier 3. If we got to 4 tiers, they'd be in my tier 4. But my tier 3.
Jeez, you're going to get some hate mail from Dallas.
Looks something like this. Tier 3 is tight for me. I just have the Seattle Seahawks, who I think are one of, if not the most underrated team in the NFL this season, and the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens I just struggle with because there's one position they upgraded. It's running back, and it's a 30-year-old running back in Derrick Henry. It's like, is that getting me over the hump from last season? I don't know. I don't think so. And they lost a lot along that defensive line and a lot of coordinators, too. I mean, everyone left the building. Their D-line coach, their DC. I just don't think they're going to be able to replicate that success because obviously they were a tier 1 team a year ago. But this Seattle Seahawks team, I want to focus on them for a little bit because they stole that Ravens DC. They have Mike McDonald now. They have Ryan Grubbs, who was the College of Washington's OC last year, who put up record-breaking offenses there with Michael Penix Jr. and all those wide receivers. They now have a trio of wide receivers in Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, that can replicate a lot of the stuff they did at Washington last year that was so transformative for them. And a guy in Geno Smith who can sling it down the football field.
You can throw it, dude.
The only question mark with them is this offensive line because they were banged up to the gills a year ago. He had no time whatsoever because Charles Cross and the right tackle who I'm blanking on.
I like Charles Cross a lot.
Could not stay on the football field.
They've got something there with him.
Those are talented dudes. They were playing great as rookies 2 years ago, but could not stay healthy last season. Those guys see the football field this year. for 17, 18 games, which Abe Lucas is still banged up right now, unfortunately, so maybe they won't. But if they do, this team is a tough out. They just are. They can go toe-to-toe with anyone in the league.
I think that you can have those issues with the offensive line as long as you've got a guy who can throw the football with accuracy outside the numbers, deep ball, short ball, over the middle. Geno Smith can do it all. The receiver room is the reason that I think I still have faith in these Seattle Seahawks, okay? We're looking at JSN's early numbers in the season last year. People are saying bust. And I'm saying, look at the other guys he has to share volume with, okay? This is what Geno Smith has to deal with every single week. And when I say he has to deal with it, it's a good thing he's got to deal with it. He's got dudes who can get open at any mark. The first down marker, 10 yards past it, and somebody underneath. He's got 3 dudes who he can throw it to. So Geno Smith, if the ball's out, if he's processing the right way, the offensive line concerns don't bother me as much. The defense, whoever they come out to be this year, that will be the reason that gets them over the hump.
Didn't make your tier 3, though.
Didn't make my tier 3.
All that praise and didn't make his tier 3.
Didn't make my tier 3.
All right, we're going to get to some real deal dark horse contenders, teams that we haven't mentioned yet that could make a run right after this. We've been breaking down the Super Bowl contenders, the real ones, tiering them up. Some teams we haven't mentioned, though, Kyle. The Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, Atlanta Falcons, who put a lot of money out there this free agency offseason, all the trades they made. Who is one, though? Who is the team for you that is off the radar right now that you think if the stars align, they could be in that mix come?
I'm going to give you one, and I would give you 2 or 3, and you named 2 or 3 that I would have put in here. But for me, it's going to be the Los Angeles Rams.
Ooh,
and you cannot downplay the intelligence of Sean McVay, the natural God-given ability that Matt Stafford has to get out of jams with his arm, to look off defenders. You look at Aaron Donald leaving the building, and what do? And they go and find 2 young guys to fill in. Obviously, nobody's going to be able to stand up to what Aaron Donald has stood up to for the last decade as a defensive tackle. But the Rams have reloaded. They found a way to sustain their level of defense. They found a way to keep Matt Stafford with dangerous weapons on the outside. Puka Nacua, second iteration of him. Cooper Kupp, are we going to see him have another breakout year? We all love Cooper Kupp, but these questions remain to be seen. If there is a team, it's going to be the dark horse Los Angeles Rams, and it's kind of that storybook thing for Matt Stafford. People want to see it maybe again.
I just worry about that defense with no Aaron Donald, no Raheem Morris. I love the offense. They're going to play fun football. It's going to be a great team to watch because they're going to be in some high-scoring games, but I struggle to see them really getting through an NFC playoffs. The one team I'll say that's off the beaten path, they're not even in my tier 4. They're way down the list. But if the stars would align for them, it's the Indianapolis Colts. If Anthony Richardson takes a big next step forward, because he has an awesome situation there now. I love their O-line. I love what they did adding Adonai Mitchell in the second round. I love what they did adding Latu, who's an NFL-ready pass rusher who could be like a Will Anderson this year
Rookie of the Year pick
in terms of really making that impact right out the gate. And you combine all those things and what those guys could be together. Because we didn't get to see Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor play last year together. The game they came back.
2 ships passing in the night.
2 ships passing in the night. That's a dynamic backfield that's going to be tough to stop in the run game with this offensive line in front of them. I don't know. It could happen.
They almost took a Gardner to the playoffs.
I'm saying if we're saying a real dark horse, that's a real deal dark horse team in my opinion.
I like that. And any other ones that come to your mind? I mean, the Atlanta Falcons you mentioned.
Well, the ultimate sleeping giant is the Cleveland Browns,
who
we talked about off the top of the show with the Deshaun Watson cap space that they cleared. If they do make a Brandon Ayuk deal, they get him in the fold, and Deshaun Watson looks like the Deshaun we saw with Texans. It could happen. All right, there you have it. Our Super Bowl tiers. Make sure you guys check out the Pushing the Pile podcast. It's going to be every Monday through Thursday during the football season, 9:30 a.m. Eastern. Hope you guys can join us.